All right, welcome everyone. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Map Time Davis. This is our last Map Time Davis of the school year, but we are really excited that we get to have Nate Roth joining us today from the state of California, Department of, I'm forgetting your department, Nate.
Department of Conservation.
Yes, that's it, Department of Conservation. There's nothing like being on the spot to make you forget everything that you're supposed to say. So really quickly, Map Time Davis is a kind of local variant of the Map Time concept, which is meetups that happen all over the world in various cities, literally to give people time to make maps. We tend to be a little bit more on the research-oriented side of things with methods related to academic research, because we are on an academic campus and we're supported by UC Davis Data Lab, which is a unit on campus that helps folks with their data needs around research. You can find out more about that at datalab.ucdavis.edu. Obviously we have workshops. You're here for one of those. We have workshops on various data topics, and we also do office hours and consultations, and we work with researchers on various levels. So if you're curious about what we do, come see us, especially drop-in hours is a great place to come chat. So today we have Nate Roth here from the California Department of Conservation, and I have worked with Nate for a very long time. We did our PhDs together, and we worked at the Information Center for the Environment together as well. And now he works at the Department of Conservation, and he has his hands in a lot of GIS things, and I'm really glad he's here to tell us about some of the things he's been working on today. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Nate, and then let him take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to touch base back at Davis. There are absolutely those days, sometimes those weeks, and occasionally those months where I'm like, I miss Davis. I miss the general collaborative attitude. Not that the folks I work with aren't collaborative, but it's a different feeling, and it does truly tug at the heartstrings a little bit. What I'm planning to talk maybe a little bit more about me and my role as it connects to some of the things that I'll discuss. So I am technically the Chief Science and Data Advisor for the California Department of Conservation. I work within the Director's Office for the Department of Conservation. But a large portion of what I'm going to be talking about today is done much more in collaboration with our parent agency, the California Natural Resources Agency, which is the parent agency to ourselves at the DOC or the Department of Conservation, Department of Water Resources, CAL FIRE, state parks, and as Michelle said, there's nothing like being on the spot to make you forget it. Innumerable commissions, councils, conservancies that apply, that are underneath the agency as well. Specifically, the piece that I think going to spend the majority of the time focusing on is an effort that was spurred, and I believe, let's make sure, am I sharing my the 30 by 30?
Yeah, page? That looks good.
Okay. An effort that I'm going to be presenting primarily, an effort that we worked on in close partnership with Esri, as well as a great many departments, commissions, both at the state level, primarily with connections to some local and regional governments, as well as some coordination to some, though not terribly deep coordination, to the federal government on 30 by 30 and the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy is the full name of it. Both of these documents were defined as being a required deliverable under an executive order issued in October of 2019. Was it 19 or 20? Yes, 19. No, sorry, 20. the time has blended together on me, as it probably has for a great many of you. And what those two do is the 30 by 30 is part of an international movement to conserve 30% of some areas, both land and water resources, for biodiversity by 2030. The Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy is an effort that is more specific to the state, though there are in some other areas evolving, though I like to think of them as trailing and in many cases somewhat modeled on California's efforts to make more effective use of these states' sort of non-urban, though even then we have fingers into it, lands to improve the resilience, mitigate climate change, and more effectively position ourselves to be able to adapt as it does happen across the state. So with that, what I'm planning to do is give a moderately paced tour through CA Nature, which is an online GIS component that was constructed to support both the 30 by 30 and the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategies efforts. So I was asked to play a leading role in it, and it's been an absolute pleasure to do so. As you'll no doubt notice, there are certainly some places where some compromises needed to be made in choices of applications and the types of data that we could effectively present. But overall, the more I managed to step a little bit aside from the nuts and bolts of being in the middle of it, I've become really pretty, it's become one of those things that I can look back, well, can look at, it's not so much back yet, and say, hey, we did something really significant here, and we've started to demonstrate a model for doing this type of thing that a lot of other folks are taking up, and several of them are honestly managing to improve in some areas that I'm very happy to see. So californianature.ca.gov is the home for CA Nature, a subset of it, as well as all of the contents on 30 by 30. The Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy is referenced and accessible, but if you click on it, you'll end up going to the agency's main website for reviewing the actual documents that are now published in their final public versions. But I mean, that's all well and good. Interestingly, we're a little slow, probably because I'm streaming. On loading some items in here. Let's see. So one of the methods we're using throughout both the website as well as the CA Nature specific component is what we started to call progressive disclosure. It is an approach in which we take, honestly, it's very simple in concept, though can be relatively challenging to implement without getting yourself a little bit tangled up. Start simply, and then allow folks to dig deeper, whether that's digging deeper by going further down the page or by interacting more specifically with components in a web application. You let folks basically go as deep as their interests and your data will allow them to go. So don't overwhelm them at the beginning, and instead cultivate their interest and encourage them to explore further. So that's what we're doing throughout the website. Starting with our initial documents and the ability to get to them, those being key items, a little bit more explanatory issue about what the purpose of the 30 by 30 initiative is, in the form of an interactive story map that people can work with and learn that little bit more, and then getting into a link over to CA Nature, but in this case here, just a quick exploration, a quick introduction of what it's trying to do. And so from there, I'm just going to hop over to definitely is slow on loading this morning. We have some basic overviews of our understanding of our current status on the progress towards that 30%, both for terrestrial as well as marine components of the state. CA Nature itself follows that same that as a web page follows that same core principle, starting out simple with a basic introduction, those slightly enhanced sets of dashboarding tools for what our current status is, some additional information about what portion of those areas that are considered 30 by 30 conservation areas are in terms of their open access, as well as the levels of biodiversity focus within the landscapes that we're tracking within it. It's worth noting that these gap codes 1 and 2, which have very strong biodiversity components, are our primary stand-in for meeting the requirements to be considered as part of the terrestrial component of the 30% that we're trying to achieve. We then make use of story maps. So both that same initial explanatory one that you would have seen on the previous page, as well as additional story maps that we're using as introductions to some of our more interactive applications later on, and educational components about the issues and the data that are then presented within the actual explorers themselves. You'll note that we have, let's call them 3 primary components that we deal with. We have biodiversity components, we have climate related components, climate change, and we have access, and in particular connection to the Natural Resources Agency's new Outdoors for All initiative, trying to ensure that everybody in the state of California has equitable access to open space, and not just any old open space, but improve access to open space that's natural in character. I don't know that we need to dive in any particular detail into any of these guides. One that might be of interest to a few of you, because it may be additionally interesting in that I couldn't find any existing ones, so we built a little bit more of a guide for using a lot of Esri's open data components that is targeted at a non-technical, non-GIS user to try to give them a personal entry point into how they might start to explore a little bit further and a little bit more on their own than they might otherwise be able to. And then we have our Explorer applications. Each of these provides, we believe, a new and valuable set of insights that people can explore themselves in the data. And I'll go into each of these with a little bit more detail than I have so far. So the Biodiversity Explorer, in particular, this component, and you'll note that this is a repeating pattern. We have a primary display that starts in a simpler form, not necessarily simple, but a simpler form, And then we have some additional options available across the top to explore thematically similar but functionally separate aspects of the issue. So, for example, the ACE biodiversity component allows for a deeper exploration of the Department of Fish and Wildlife's ACE3 data set, where you can select what types of category, which of the data sets within them, each of which contains a primary set of indices calculated from the known sets of species data. And in fact, a lot of it is essentially a roll up. So we have components for terrestrial biodiversity and aquatic biodiversity that roll up to a species biodiversity component. And further, you'll note that within the terrestrial biodiversity, we have a number of independent, well, I'll use that term for now, separate indices related to the irreplaceability, the rarity weighted richness, as well as native species richness within them, each of which can be selected for viewing and interaction. And you'll notice each of these sets of bar charts here, ranging from gray, which is essentially a no data, and then ranks 1 through 5, with 5 generally indicating the area that those areas have the highest relative value related to that topic area. You'll note we've also got a movable little area of interest for performance reasons. This is one of those compromises. We've actually limited how much it can do, but how large the area can be. But you'll notice that you can drag it and recenter it. And as you recenter, you can start to see that you'll get an update on this full depth of information. So you can start to see which areas through the full stack of ACE data do well with different aspects that are contained within the data as part of a single view of it. So for example, this area I've dropped it in is not necessarily bad in terms of the terrestrial biodiversity. But if you were to look at just terrestrial biodiversity, you might be left wondering, okay, why is the total species biodiversity, why does it have that much of it that is this rank 5 in it? You can scroll down, you can see, oh, wait, this area has a high representation of rank 5 within the aquatic biodiversity component. Similarly, you can start seeing we've got a basic mixture of the significant habitats associated with terrestrial, and the same for aquatic connectivity. Not much, honestly, in the way of the terrestrial climate resilience component. And you can then dig into each of these as you wish to see those. We also have a little bit of additional information provided as a summary within this area of interest, what types of habitat characteristics there may be within those that are all tied to the currently selected set of information. And a lot of what these mean and some guidance in how to interpret them are contained within the user guide story map for each of the for this application in particular, but the pattern is repeated in others. You can also get to that same story map through the use of this help button, which will load the story map in to support this right there. The other component of our biodiversity, our habitat and land cover explorer, which it's actually not surprising me, it's taken a little while to load, but that takes the areas that are considered conserved based on our current assessment of the available data, and tells us by each one of these high-level land cover types what percent is conserved. You can subset it to counties or ecoregions, which are based on the Bailey's ecoregions to look in more detail. Or if you're interested in more specifics about a particular land cover type, you can pan through the sets and start to see them summarized. In this case, you can use this bivariate choropleth to understand what areas of high presence versus high conservation, and then the gradients between them in this 9-point symbology set. So any questions so far? Have I lost everybody along the way? I mean, this group, I suspect a lot of this is pretty much old hat.
So
But
Naomi, oh, go ahead, Naomi. You can
Oh
ask your
yeah,
question.
this is Naomi. I just this is a really cool dashboard. It's very interesting. And when you were, it looks like you answered my question about being able to select a county or an ecoregion. Is that possible in the tool you showed just before with the circular search area? Are you able to do that here as well?
You are not able to separate out and get summaries of it by county or ecoregion. You can see that we've got the ecoregions laid over top of it, and the reality is that some of these, like these species biodiversity, is actually, if you dive into the detail and you can see the artifacts related to it, is actually eco-regionally weighted rather than a state level weighted version. You can, should you wish to, turn on counties and off ecoregions for contextual purposes, as well as a few other watershed related areas. But we do not have roll-ups of counties for them, or ecoregional totals that are available within this portion of the application.
That's really cool. You have all those different layers you can get for context. So thanks for answering my question.
Any other ones? Then the sort of the core piece of it are conserved areas explored. And one of the things that I want to note on this one is that our understanding of what data is our understanding of what is truly has a biodiversity focused set of conservation and management practices being applied to it is incomplete. There is no singular data set that has everything that we would have needed into it. And so what we've done is assembled a structure for building the data set from source content, the California Protected Areas data set, California Conservation Easement Database, the PAD US data sets, as well as independent other layers that we identified, things like wilderness areas, wild and scenic river designations, and bring those together. One of our ongoing tasks is to continue to improve all of those input data sets so that when next we rebuild this foundational data set, that it sweeps up all of the improvements. A component of that is that we don't want to make our improvements directly to this data set. We want them to go into the foundational data sets that are already embedded into a great many workflows that folks are using across the state. That's largely essential, and because if we bring it just to here, it's kind of becomes a data dead end. We want it to go into a lot of those other data sets that have the existing constituency and user base, and in many cases long histories of usage, to make sure that it gets into use in the most possible spots. So our simple overview explorer is nice. Yeah, you've got interactive map view. You can see where we've got our state's marine protected areas, which make up that 16+ % of the state's marine areas that are being considered conserved. Interactive map, which I was surprised as we did some outreach with folks, how impressed people were with what to most of us working on it thought was painfully simplistic, but people like it a lot. It was a re-emphasis of the point that sometimes those of us that are too deep in the details need to take a step back and talk with a lot of our user folks, particularly the non-technical users, and see what it is that they're going to get the most out of. So, I mean, for me, it was gratifying to get that kind of response, but it's not terribly satisfying overall. So what we've got are more detailed viewers available for folks that want to dig that little bit deeper, that allow people to interrogate the data a little bit more thoroughly, start to see which areas are category 1, category 2 in terms of the gap codes, and by result of that, considered to be part of our 30 by 30 conservation areas. Which is nice. You can refilter based on standard dashboard type activities. How much this is federal and so on, with commensurate updates on this. You can filter by county should you wish to. You can our climate regions, which are a very coarse division of the state by region. But what I like to direct folks to is, because we get a lot of comments from folks saying, hey, my neighborhood park or this area that I know should be conserved is not shown on here. What's going on here? By doing custom selection, you can look a lot deeper and start to review the categories 3 and 4 that are also within our database, but are not coded such that they count at the moment as part of the 30 by 30 conservation areas. There's a few glaring components of it that are missing, and it's an issue within our source data. And some of them, like I'll point to the Jack and Laura Dangerman Preserve at Point Conception, is currently coded as a category 4 based on the data from the conservation easement, the protected areas database, and PAD US databases. We've already slated this in for update, and when next we recompile the data, it should be falling into the 30 by 30 conservation areas. There are quite a few others for which similar action is already queued up. Great many of them being related to NCCP or HCP processes that are adopted, and properties like these areas in the around Tehachapi, the Tejon Ranch Conservancy areas that are also not classified. So we're using this as an outreach tool as well to identify areas that some of the state's foundational data sets are not adequately representing at present. So I'm expecting that our next update for these, timing has not yet been decided, will sweep in quite a few of these, and will likely move that 23-24-ish% conserved up by a percentage point or so as a result of those changes. That said, there's still that gap between where we are right now and the 30% in 8 years still has a lot of ground to cover. But we also have a lot of opportunities. We have a large amount of area that is currently under Forest Service or BLM land that has multiple use mandates that by themselves do not meet our definition for conservation with a biodiversity emphasis on them. Quite a few of those are under consideration for alternate management plans being applied to them that could certainly bring them across the line and help us make up that 6% or so of the state that we need to. There are also ongoing discussions about the appropriate role for inclusion of some forms of easement that may have sort of mixed use associated with them. So like agricultural easements that we don't want to necessarily give entry into it if they are a row or orchard crop that's very heavily managed, whereas others that may be on grazing lands that are managed such that they have significant biodiversity benefits, those may, under consideration, deserve some accounting. Any other questions so far on these ones? I noticed that I need to step up the pace a little bit. Okay, I'll take a very quick tour through the Climate Explorer, and then just a very, very brief hop into the Access Explorer. Climate Explorer pulls data from CalAdapt, which is the state-sponsored repository for a lot of climate change related modeling efforts across the state. In this case, we've built a comparison tool that will allow folks to look at the differences over time with different selections of variable climate forcing scenario, model types, or combinations across the landscape. And I'll just do a quick set of change within it to give a little bit stronger comparison. I'll stay with I'll keep it reasonably consistent. Let's stay with it's actually not loading. The joys of things that don't behave quite the way you expect. Some of these load a little bit differently. Now we'll just so 30-year averages on them. We can start to look at it with between what's essentially a 30-year average based around the start of the still modeled, but modeled based on historical data. We can see that the differences in predicted average temperatures, in this case, maximum daily temperatures, average maximum daily temperatures over a 30-year window to remove some of the variability in it that can otherwise pop out. As you noted in some of what I had there, there were options to go to single years. That's one of those levels that we allow people to drill down into, but don't necessarily start people with them because there are legitimate concerns about folks looking at individual model year outcomes and interpreting those as a more precise estimate of what would be occurring at that time than is warranted. So we can also start to look at individual locations, have some charting based on the changes in time through that location and the average sets. So we can start to look at how our average times may climb through it. We can also look, you can see here, we've got the difference. So how much of that is a change, histogram associated with it. So you can review which areas are likely to experience which levels of that difference in this case, in temperature. We can do the same with the minimum temperature, average minimum temperatures, as well as precipitation across these sets of models. We've also got a little explorer built on a subset of the Cosmos data developed by the USGS and a number of other partners, looking at sea level rise with differing levels of sea level rise and different sets of storm conditions associated with them. So 25 centimeter sea level rise, what might you expect to see in terms of areas that are both likely to be inundated directly, or in this case, more susceptible to flooding in low-lying areas should there be a breach in some other, like a levee or similar barrier that is currently preventing it from being flooded. And this is a piece I actually have some bits I need to paste into it, similar to what we did with the habitat, though again varying a little bit in character. We have land cover types that may have a role to play in helping buffer, avoid, mitigate, or otherwise increase resilience to climate change across the state based on the types of actions we might be able to take within these land cover types. So we can start to see subsets of those land cover types, areas where they're present, the proportion of them that are in areas. And this is a piece that I'm actually getting ready to paste in a lot of the content for those, as it's just been approved for publication. And then the Access Explorer component, just to hop in really quick. This is one that we're expecting will be replaced pretty heavily in the future. It's a placeholder for an ongoing effort, the Access for All that is really just getting launched, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with them to better define the types of areas that are supported by different types of parks and the summaries of demographics that are associated with the services provided by those parks. There's a couple existing versions. State Parks has one that's state parks focused. This is one that we built doing basic summary of areas surrounding the full suite of data that we're tracking within our conserved areas, both the gaps 1 and 2 specifically, as well as the full set, gaps 1, 2, 3, and 4, that are all noted as having open access for the public. Any other questions so far before I scoot along a little bit? The Conservation Opportunities Modeler. This is an exciting addition. Many of you, and this is again an example of us letting people dive a little bit deeper. It allows for weighted raster overlay to be conducted with the layers to be included, the weights to be given to them, and scores associated with with properties in those layers being fully customizable by the user. I don't know that I want to get too deep into it, but let's say you're interested in areas with terrestrial connectivity that are, let's do that. We'll allow some habitat in there. And we can do some distance from existing conserved areas. So now we can design our model. I'm going to keep it really simple. Put not quite random, but also not far from it. I'm going to just accept the values. So we're interested in areas that have high connectivity potential, that are, we'll leave the habitat types with our default. They're very rough in there, and that are further from existing conserved areas. So we're looking for areas that contribute to conservancy but are distant from existing conserved areas. We can run it. And we can start to see areas that are that meet these criteria and give us some prioritization. I'm expecting that most people that are doing it, particularly ones that are doing it with a real intent to make use of these specific outcomes, will put a little more thought into it than I did just now. But there is a demonstration of how you can start to highlight areas of intersecting opportunities or characteristics that you'd like to emphasize. We have this all category that I used has, if I'm recalling correctly, 48 layers available to you within it based on those that are included in the other explorers. You're limited to a max of 15 in any one set of calculation for performance reasons, but we've also got curated subsets that are focused on access, biodiversity, and climate that will allow people to get started with a slightly softer learning curve than diving into the deep end with all of the layers being available. And then last, but certainly not least, I want to move into a little bit of the open data component of it. So we have sets of highlighted data that we want to let people do quick exploration of. Can start to see a little bit of the descriptive content, as well as some level of interaction with those data sets that are in there and available to you from within CA Nature. And then, of course, there's the actual open data component of it, where you can do search either by name or keyword components, some pre-categorization of the data, that story map that I mentioned before, to learn a little, to give people an entry point into learning a little bit more, and then a request. And this has been reasonably heavily used for folks that have said, hey, I know about this property. Either I'm a manager or here's contact information for the folks that are. We think it deserves a review in light of its being considered conserved under the 30 by 30 definition. So with that, looks like we have about 10 minutes left. I'd love to open up for questions if there are any, or I might be able to do at least a quick chat on some other areas of data, most notably elevation data for the state that I'm tied into as well.
Looks like Alex had a question about one of the things that you talked about earlier. Alex, do you just want to explain the context of that, since I think we moved on to a different thing since you asked it?
I mean, it applies to most of the maps. I noticed, especially in the last one, you mentioned that it was a raster analysis, but I noticed that everything was a hex grid. Are you converting the raster data sets to hex grids?
Yes, the hex grids in that case from the ACE data set were rasterized to a common raster cell size for all of the data sets. And yes, you're hinting at one of those sets of compromises on things that we discussed internally. as we were assembling it, there are definitely elements for that can be problematic given resolution of data.
The other question I have is, do you prevent users from zooming in too far in order to get them to not try and interpret data at a super fine level?
We are not actively restricting people's access to zoom levels.
And that didn't raise any concerns with the protected areas data? I know historically there have often been concerns about easements and knowledge of easements in the public domain.
All of those data sets are pulled from the publicly available versions of them. So we are not the sole source of those data sets. Folks couldn't get into them for other reasons. We have been careful in some cases where there may be personal information associated with them. For example, in the conservation easement data sets, you can theoretically get to some easement holder names are within the publicly available data set. We actually chose to suppress the fields that are most likely to contain those within the data set that we rebuilt from it, to avoid having individual names attached to it. We also made a number of other assumptions. The access characteristics of easements are not complete within the conservation easements data set. And so in that example, we made the assumption as we were assembling it that unless it's specified otherwise, that easements are not publicly accessible. So we made a number of those steps, and then as a result of that, those easements that are either not publicly accessible or assumed to not be publicly accessible do not appear within like the Access Explorer or the other components that would be indicating levels of access associated with them.
This is Naomi. I've got a comment, not a question, and I just wanted to say how much I love dashboards. I really love them, and I think I was thinking about this morning with about building models for species is what I was thinking. It was an unrelated, but we have so much information, we have so much data. Like the question of climate change isn't like, oh, we should keep studying the problem. Like we should, but it's not like we don't know the answer. I really like the climate dashboard because it lets people just go look where they want to go look. Like it shows the, I thought that was a really great way of showing the answer, letting people, the slider was a great science communication right there. So I like how you put it all together. So that's my comment. This is very cool. Nice job.
Well, we had a good team of folks working on it. Anything else? If not, I'd be happy to do. We've got about 4 minutes before I have to turn into a pumpkin and disappear.
I was kind of curious if you know of, like, I know you built this for a certain purpose, but do you know of anyone who's using this, either the data or the dashboards for other things yet, or is it too early to know?
We know of some folks that are using it for some pretty interesting purposes. So one example, okay, a couple easy examples. It's being used to leverage some groups that are not contributors, that may be easement holders, and have not contributed to the conservation easement. It's being used with them to try to bring them into the fold in an appropriate way so that their efforts can be accounted for within it. We've also had several community groups start to circulate items, either using these products directly or using data from it, saying, hey, our area is either in some cases doing really well relative to that 30% goal, or in other cases that we've seen using it to say, hey, if we want to be a part of the solution, we've got some work we need to be doing. So we're definitely seeing that. We've had a lot of folks that, particularly very early on to it, that were using it to review the data, and that's actually been one of my ulterior motives. Is we need to improve CPAD and CCED's data quality, and we're getting traction from folks helping us do the crowdsourcing of where areas need to be reviewed in more detail, and in some cases even giving us a lot of the detail that we need to be able to ensure that those decisions are made in a justifiable way.
Well, that's really cool that it's already getting some use and in really important ways. So I think we're just about out of time, since I know we've got a bunch of folks who need to run to meetings at 11. But Nate, I just want to thank you for doing this. I know it was kind of a last minute thing to get this together, but this was really important. And I'm really glad that you came and presented today, because now I have a lot more stuff to look at and more data sources that I know about. And I'm sure our attendees have probably learned quite a bit too. So thank you very much. I'm really glad that you were able to come today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.